The following audio-supported podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please speak to a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions. The guests on today's show were paid to participate in this podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited about this, our last day for our convention. Actually, I have to say it's always bittersweet because, yes, it's the last day, and hopefully everything has been so jam-packed and you have so much information and so many new contacts and so many networking opportunities. And for that, we are excited about. But it's also bittersweet because it's been a joy to be here with all of you and to just absorb your energy and to see the hugs. And I always love hearing the squeals. And think we'll recognize and see each other. And so, and that's going to end. It's like a birthday party that ends. So, and the presents have all been you. So I want to welcome you today to, I decided to use my phone. I usually don't, but I saw so many people doing it, so bear with me. Welcoming you to today's first program on our wonderful Saturday agenda. And this is SCDAA's Masterclass on Sickle Cell Disease. This is a series that we put in place a couple of years ago that brings together leading experts in sickle cell disease and focuses those discussions on novel concepts surrounding disease-modifying and curative therapies and their impact on those living with sickle cell disease. Today's topic is a special and kind of unique topic. It is sickle cell disease in the media, SCEMD, S-C-E-M-D, and HER. And it explores the increased visibility of sickle cell disease in film and on television. And I know you all have seen some of these shows, and we'll do a little rundown of it. We are so excited to not only bring the subject to you, but to partner with Agios and Cheat Codes to have this as a podcast. So in a couple of months, you'll also be able to go to our Masterclass website, we'll be able to go to the Agios website and see it as a podcast. So this is a great collaboration and a unique one course. I'm really, really excited about it. Cheat Codes is going to be hosted by Dr. Amar Zaidi and Dr. Mike Callahan. And we've got wonderful guests who will introduce you to. But first, I would like to bring to the microphone the president and CEO of Agios, Ryan Goff.
Well, thank you very much, Regina, and good morning, everybody. They will start with some honest feedback. You guys looked great last night, great. Now, I'm not going to single you out. You're not both applause yet. You're not going to single you out, but some of you stayed on the dance floor a little bit too long. In fact, I don't want to hurt guests. Gabrielle, Tasha, you were out there as well? Yeah. All right, let's see.
Yeah, we seen you slide.
Yeah, that dance floor was the Demetrius effects. And if you saw me sliding, you put your video away. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Regina too. And by the way, Regina, your leadership of SCDAA is so inspiring. This is, we and Agios, we look forward to speeding just as much as you and everybody else in this room do. And this has been nothing short of yet another exceptional week. So your leadership, your partnership, and frankly, I mean, for me, I think I could say for everybody, your friendship, we so value. So thank you again. Thank you very much. So the SCDAA Convention is much more than a meeting. It is a movement. And for those of us who have the gift to attend this year after year, every year you feel some forward progress. So this year was nothing short of that. It's been very inspiring on many levels. For me personally, the best part about this meeting is hearing your stories, the very authentic stories. One example last night, you heard from Mary about her 2 daughters, 53 years of advocacy, boots on the ground. And, that was a bring the house down moment. But it's those stories that are so authentic and so truthful and need to be heard. And that's what feeds the movement that we're talking about. So that brings us to the theme of today's exceptional masterclass and cheat codes, the stories in the media. And these are missed in so many ways. And the misinformation, the inaccuracies, everyone here knows this. What it does is it fuels bias. It fuels the challenges that the sickle cell disease warriors feel every day. And frankly, it marginalizes the community. So what we need to do is share the real stories, the authentic stories, the truthful stories. And what that will do is drive advocacy, that drives allyship, that drives forward movement, the momentum that we're talking about. And it's a big responsibility. But if we just go to the theme of this meeting, empowerment, that's what empowerment's all about, is the responsibility of everybody in this room and those who are not in this room that could make it. You share your stories. So I am really, really delighted to be a participant observing what we're about to see. I just want to take a moment to introduce the celebrities who are on the side over here. First of all, no introduction necessary, but I'll say it anyway. Dr. Omar Zaidi, Dr. Z, as we know, Bick.
And then you have a speakingly well-dressed Dr. Mike Kollick and Dr. C. Let's get in and out of us. And then I'm going to like to introduce our special guest, but I have a chance to sit next to Gabrielle Bedejo last night, and that yet another incredibly inspiring story that I'm excited for all of you to hear about. Natasha Thomas, who shows up in the pink today, coming in hot. And then Nick Hudson, and you're going to hear from all three of these folks in just a second. So how about a big morning, wake up a little bit, big welcome to our guests. Let's dip up.
All right, how we sound? We sound pretty good?
How many of you have listened to G Codes before? Hi, I love it. So you guys know what this is all about. You know what we're trying to do here. You know the energy of this podcast. You know how me and Dr. C like to do things. Dr. C mostly puts up with me during these podcasts.
Agios is a biopharmaceutical company that's fueled by connections with patient communities, healthcare professionals, partners, and each other. Building on these connections and the company's unmatched leadership in PK activation, Agios is pioneering therapies for rare blood disorders, including PK deficiency, thalassemia, and sickle cell disease. To learn more, visit us at agios.com. That's agios.com. To join the conversation with other patient allies, follow us on Instagram at Ally Voices Rising. That's Ally, A-L-L-Y, Voices Rising.
There's a lot of power in storytelling. Humans have an innate ability not only to storytell, but to consume stories. That's how we've passed on knowledge for generations. That's how we've passed on even bias in some cases. The power of storytelling comes with a lot of responsibility. And I think, Dr. Mike, today we want to talk a little bit about what that means, particularly when it pertains to sickle cell disease.
Yeah, I think, Dr. Z, stories are so powerful. I think myself as a physician and scientist, and I look at labs and I look at data. But really, I think about it in stories. You know, the resident tells me the patient's history, it's a story. I talk about the clinical trial as a story. And I think even how we think about ourselves is a narrative, a story. And these stories we see in the media influence that. It influences how we think about ourselves and how we think about other people. So it's so important that we get that right. So I'm really excited to talk to our guests today and hear how we can make that better.
Yeah, so what I want to do, I thought about trying to introduce all of you myself, but it feels like that's going to be really challenging to sort of capture the depth of which you're related or deeply rooted into the sickle cell space, because all of you have unique connections to the sickle cell space, and you also have very unique experiences as it pertains to this storytelling, this connection to media. So I want you guys to help me out with these introductions. Let's start with you, Miss Natasha.
Am I on? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Thomas, and I have sickle cell disease SC. I'm a 70s baby. I was born in 74 in Trinidad and Tobago. And so my mom is my biggest advocate. I am one of 7, 5 girls and 2 boys. The boys bookend us. And so it's me and my older brother. My older brother, we were born on the same day, a year apart. So you know what the parents were doing. And so my brother was the first one to experience symptoms of sickle cell disease. And then when it happened to me, my mom, who is my biggest advocate, told the doctors, I think she has what my son has. And I think, she should be tested. But as we know, doctors, and this is the 70s in the Caribbean, they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. They wanted to operate on me. They did. Told it was my appendix, wherever the pain was at that time. And a few years later, and they told my mom, yeah, it was that. And they took the appendix out. And of course, I was eventually diagnosed with sickle cell disease. And a few years later, when I had my gallbladder removed, my appendix was still there. So they lied to my mom. And anyway, so I've been in it. Me and my brother, we used to go in and out of the hospital about 3 to 4 times for the year with crises. I would spend a few days to a week in the hospital, and we migrated to the U.S. in '94. We migrated certain times. My dad was here first, and then some of my siblings, and then I was the last to migrate in '94. Unfortunately, my brother passed in '99 at 25 from complication of sickle cell disease, and he was still in Trinidad, so he was never able to come with us. And in 2007, I was working some job and hated it. I was like, can y'all find me something else? And it was like, have you ever worked downtown Baltimore? I was like, no. And then there's the Sickle Cell Disease Association. Now, this time I've been in the U.S., never heard of the Sickle Cell Disease Association, never met anybody else with sickle cell disease. And when I came into the organization in '06, I was a temp. They brought me on in '07, and they told me, my supervisor at the time, she was like, I'll hire you because you have sickle cell. And I would never tell anybody, and I never knew that I would be hired for having a disease. And so I've been here for about 14 years before I left in 2021, came back and did the conference as a consultant, and this year I came back part-time on the team with SCDAA. And I always tell everybody, and the conference, I love doing the conference, love coming to the conference, and I always call it a family reunion because it's great to see so many friends come back, and especially this year, there was so many new faces who we hadn't seen in a few years. Yeah. Ms. Dottie, Ms. Dolores Edwards, so many great faces, so just glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Natasha. Our next panelist is from my homeland, from Canada. Gabriel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm Gabriel Badejo, and just wanted to say thank you for having me, to SCDAA, AGO's Cheat Codes for having me. This is like a wonderful opportunity and topic to be a part of. So I was born in Nigeria, migrated to Canada like when I was like 1 year old, and was diagnosed with sickle cell at 1.5 years old, where my parents didn't know that they had the trait, running into the daycare, trying to figure out what's going on with their kid because he's crying and, he's swollen and this and that. And then eventually they diagnosed me. And, over the years, I've had many crises, I'd probably average maybe 2 crises a year at minimum that would land me in the hospital, a lot of crises in between that and stuff like that. But I found my way, working and landing in the film industry. So I'm a film producer and director in Toronto, and I've been doing that for about like 13 years, give or take. And it's been an interesting journey. One thing that about me is that I never really like to be open about my story with sickle cell. And it wasn't until I had like a extremely frustrating experience in like 2018 where like everything that could go wrong went wrong, where like you're not being believed. They're telling you, they had told me they've given me morphine, but they're really giving me saline. Then I had to crawl out that hospital to go to another hospital, ended up ODing there, and like, a lot of things happened. And in that moment I was like, all right, like it's time for like me to like share the story, because I know if this is happening to me, this must be happening to everybody else with sickle cell. And so I'm actually working on a documentary right now about sickle cell and my experience having sickle cell, and process doing the stem cell transplant, which I did 4 years ago, and I'm 4 years post-transplant. So yeah. So I'm on a great journey of just like advocacy and sharing our stories, and understanding that media and storytelling is like one of the most powerful tools we have to try and make connections with people, amongst our community and others beyond. Yeah,
Man, we're so happy you're here sharing your story with us. Welcome to Cheat Codes, and welcome to SCDAA. Our final panelist, Nick.
Thanks, Dr. Z. My name is Nick Hudson, and before even going into anything, it's always a testament to SCDAA and Cheat Codes and Agios that you think you know all these really cool stories and you meet all these cool people year after year after year, and then I met Gabriel, and I was like, where's he been hiding? Like every year there's incredible people to meet at this. And I think that's just such a testament to the people who are putting this on, that's always a true goal of the mission, is to bring people together. And it's not just a conference where there's business going on. It's not just, there's not even any of that. It's truly a place where people can come together to talk about their shared lived experience. And I just think that's a great way to set the table for the rest of this discussion, which is how does media portray that shared experience? And for my, I guess, fairly ancillary connection to that shared experience, because I'm not someone with the same diagnosis, but I am someone who has had it pop up again and again and again in my life, professionally and personally. And that started actually with working with transplant patients, so families who were looking for stem cell and bone marrow transplant patients, and just a natural curiosity of like, why was it so much more difficult to find matches for them? And so I started working with a lot of sickle cell patients. And prior to that, I was a social worker here in Chicago on the West Side. And one of the kids who was in our program had complications in his family. So that was another emergency room trip I had to make. That was my first introduction to it. Fast forward a couple of years, the nonprofit that I have the great, I guess just I feel honored to be able to run it, is called Entertainment to Affect Change, which is a 501c3. And it was founded by someone, Patrick James Lynch, who was one of the producers of Cheat Codes and was an old friend. And he has a serious bleeding disorder and lost a family member to it. And that's why E2AC, Entertainment to Affect Change, started. And a lot of the first projects that we did were all healthcare specific, because I had a healthcare background working with transplants. And the connection to the sickle cell community was very organic. We didn't set out and say, hey, someone like me should start helping out with sickle cell stuff. It happened because when you're open to communities, and even if you don't share in the same experience as that diagnosis, if you're open to seeing how you can help, things start to happen. Because I think it's an important takeaway that there are people out there who do want to figure out ways to help, even if it doesn't affect them personally. And so that's what we do all the time at E2AC. Dr. Z is actually a board member. So is Jane Davis, who's here. I got to meet Tiana Wolford, so I'm on the board of SC Red. Yeah, give it up for, guys, let's hear it. Let's go. And when Regina started SCDAA, we just clicked immediately. And the two projects that we've worked on year after year is the Masterclass series. So that's produced by E2AC. So hopefully if this is your first time, yeah, it's great. If you've ever been to it before, virtually or in person, then you know that it's great. If this is your first time experiencing it, I hope you'll see it again. And the other that a lot of people probably remember is the Hertz Nazaire Gallery. And that was because of a voicemail that Dr. Z sent me when Hertz passed. And Regina and I, almost on the first call we ever had, were like, I got this idea. And she was like, can I tell you my idea first? And it was the same idea. And we had never spoken before that. That was weird and I think meant to be. So so those are my credentials. If you're like, why is that guy up here? That's fine.
Well, I'm pretty convinced that these are the right panelists for this session, right? Yeah. Dr. C, I think we can dive right into the questions.
Yeah, let's do it. Let me start by asking you, Natasha, as a doctor who took care of sickle cell and working in the sickle cell space, I used to get a lot of, what is sickle cell? And now I get some more, I saw this thing about sickle cell. I imagine you get that on steroids. So what's been your experience with sickle cell in the media and how you encounter that?
That's a great question. And as we know, sickle cell always leads with pain. You know, that's the first thing you hear about with sickle cell and pain. And so trying to explain what sickle cell pain feels like to people, because that's always the thing of what is sickle cell disease. Tell them it's a blood disorder, it's inherited, and the most prevalent symptom is pain. And so to explain what pain is, I always say, think of the worst pain you ever experienced and then multiply that times 10. And in the media, what we've been seeing lately, if you know anything about me, I'm a Trekkie. I love action movies. I love sci-fi. And I know I've seen all the Transformer movies. And so when I saw this latest Transformer movie and when it opened, and the first impression was about a young kid having a sickle cell crisis. And after I watched the movie, I called Regina. I was like, Regina, do you know what's going on? That this is a movie on the blockbuster, you know, on the big screen. And the way he held his hand when he was going through a crisis, the way his brother was talking to him at the table. I've had many of those conversations with my family, with my friends. And I think they got it right on that one, kind of telling the story. It wasn't the entire story, but it was a part of that person's life, you know, from going to at the dinner table and then going to the hospital, knowing, you know, sometimes you try to stay home and manage it, but sometimes you know you have to go to the emergency room. And then you get to the emergency room and you're worried, oh my God, can I afford to pay this bill when I get out of here? So I think Transformers got it right on that one. And so we need more of those stories, because that was just like a small snippet. And so, and I used to never tell my story. And I like when you open up, it's about telling stories. And, you know, you never want to be stigmatized and people treat you differently. And so now I tell my story all the time. Yeah. Tell my story all the time. Yeah. And so.
No, it's really powerful. I think you're spot on. I think that is a pretty accurate representation of what happens in pain. One of the things that I was thinking about with Dr. C earlier is, you know, when I first came into clinic with sickle cell disease and the patients who live with it, the stories were centered around acute chest syndrome and stroke and pain. But I think as I started getting to know sickle cell warriors, the stories shifted. Now the stories I remember are not about pain and stroke and acute chest syndrome. It's about all the victories. Like I think about, you see people like Tiana and, you know, Demetrius thriving, right? And you remember those stories. So for me, this idea that the story of a sickle cell patient is confined to one event feels like we're minimizing the entire human experience of sickle cell disease, which does have ups. I mean, it has downs, but it certainly has a lot of ups. And I feel like, you know, the representation of that would be really good. And with that, Gabriel, I want you to give your producer view on how you think about, you know, what's being captured, and also share with the audience something that they might have seen of yours that you've worked on.
Oh, okay. I'll start with that. So I mainly work in like the short format part of the industry. So that's like commercials, music videos, branded content. I've worked with like Land Rover, Jaguar, um, Roots, Google, NBA. Um, Worked on music videos with Popcorn, Billie Eilish, Jesse Reyes, and yeah,
Amazing.
so many
Extra
projects.
celebrity.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's give him a round of applause, guys. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. And from a behind the scenes kind of perspective on what I'm seeing appear on the screens as of late, because I think it's actually like really beautiful that we're seeing our stories or being mentioned on the screen. Because I remember like when I was 18 and feeling alone because I didn't know anybody with sickle cell, and I was literally searching for like media to see if to see my experience in someone else, right? And there was like maybe like 3 things I can find, and now like there's a bunch more. But I think like there must be, I like the first thing that comes to mind is that there must be like a real fight with the filmmakers or the writers that want to inject sickle cell into the stories that are being told, right? Like with funders and stuff like that, where it's like, all right, why is this important? And a lot of times, like a lot of like big heads at like the networks or broadcasters and stuff like don't know about sickle cell like most people, right? So like, convincing them to like understand why it's important to mention sickle cell and how many people are affected by it and how it impacts many communities, and it's a valuable story or thing to touch on. I think it's really commendable. But also too, like, there's variance in like, the how like things are being depicted. And I think that like with the Transformers thing, I thought they did a really good job. Even like the documentary Spilled Milk, I thought that was like phenomenal. And there's other shows that I've watched where I was just like, it's kind of interesting, but it's like, it takes, us as a community to try and get more involved with these networks and broadcasters when they're doing projects and stuff that touch on sickle cell, so we can like kind of consult. And like there's only so much that they can do like within a story, like with Transformers, like really it was only like the opening scene and like one like kind of like mention later on, right? Like they only had enough time to just tell that part of the story, right? And what they did with that time was great, right? So we can't expect them to like bite the whole thing off, right? Like there's take nibbles, right? And we'll take what we can, but I think it's like really commendable, but it takes us to like get more involved in the media space to like consult and make sure that what they are able to tell for the amount of time they have, that we're getting them to get that right.
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective, Dr. C.
Yeah. Nick, I'm really interested to get your perspective on this, as someone who makes documentaries about rare diseases and thinks about how best to tell those stories, and having put together that beautiful montage for us. Thank you. I'd love to hear your perspective on how sickle cell has been portrayed in the media.
Yeah, for sure. And it's good to know for Entertainment to Affect Change, we have over 200 films in development, everything from commercial films to shorts to super specific documentaries that, are probably not commercially viable, but are important to tell. And so we kind of get to see the whole gamut of when projects come to us. We see them at every stage, from when it's just an idea on a Word document, it's called a one sheet, all the way down to when it's in impact campaign mode, when it's out there, it's being distributed at theaters or film festivals. And there are specialized screenings and resource guides that accompany the project. So you get to see projects from this really 360-degree view. And the thing that stands out the most for sickle cell is the fact that it does pop up a lot more. So the volume of times, the amount of times it pops up is definitely more than it used to. And I think there's some truth to like any press is good press, because the more the name goes in front of people, the more it's getting in front of people who don't have any other reason to pay attention to it. And anytime you're dealing with a diagnosis, and and whether that gets into the amount of cases or the amount of diagnoses, anytime you're dealing with a diagnosis that doesn't affect somebody, if you can just like punch them in the face a couple times with the name of it, it will remind them that it exists. And they might not remember everything about it. They might not remember 100% of the true things, but the more you can get the name in front of people, the more they'll go, oh, didn't I see that on a show once? And then maybe they Google it, and then maybe they realize there are people out there who have it. And so it does, working with E2AC allows me to see this like kind of really top-down view of different kinds of content and how it's portrayed across those kinds of content, because Gabriel made a great point in that it's told, there's a lot of variance in the amount of due diligence that someone's going to do depending on the type of content it is. And the two best examples of this on opposite sides of the spectrum of truth about sickle cell is you have like a documentary like Spilled Milk where it's about two friends, and that is really important to the filmmaker. He wants to get it right. He wants to tell the patient's story correctly. He probably spent hours and hours and hours doing research and interviews, and his best friend spent his life fighting it. So you can, going into that movie, you're going to go, this person probably really cares about getting that right. All the way down to the other side of the spectrum, which didn't make the cut into the montages, like the SNL joke, which was a poorly timed, incorrect, callous joke that was part of one skit late in the episode that probably was just a throw in, that they write within a day. Like those SNL skits are written in 48 hours. So watching it, you're probably like, all right, this is really upsetting. But also know that that person probably didn't do any research, maybe did some light Googling, maybe heard something and threw it in as a joke. And so being aware of what the level of competency of the writer or producer was is important. And also is important to know that if someone's going to go out there and mention sickle cell, it is your right, and I think your responsibility to voice your opinion on its inaccuracy or its accuracy, and to commend the ones that do it right and to yell at the ones who don't, because that's part of what patient advocacy means.
Yeah. Could I add on to that, actually?
Please.
Yeah, like I feel like it's like, I think like number one priority is, like you said, like just getting the name sickle cell mentioned is like a big deal for us, like where to just strike a first stepping point for familiarity, right? So like when they get hit in the face again, they do the Google search. And the other thing too is like meeting people where they're at, right? Like, all of us in this room either have a direct or indirect connection with sickle cell. We clearly have an interest. We're here, right? But there's a lot of people that are not here that don't have an interest or don't know they have an interest in it. And, there's different things that we can do to meet them where they're at. And like, not every piece of content is for us. It could be also for them, right? And the way we approach stories and telling those stories is different, right? Like what I see in some content would be much different than what someone else sees when they have no idea what sickle cell is.
Yeah, that's a great point. This idea of who's consuming that media, right? And Natasha, I'd love to hear from you. As somebody who consumes that media, as a warrior, what would good look like if you were making media? What would you want to portray?
I mean, we as warriors are so much more than our sickle cell disease. So if I look at my life, and I can only talk about me personally, I grew up in a family of 7, five girls and 2 boys, and, two great parents. And they were disciplinarians. Like my mom was more of the disciplinarian than my dad. And they didn't play. And, my siblings, I had one sibling who, if she wasn't the boss, nobody was playing, right? So, so growing up, I've had so many experiences, living with sickle cell disease, going to the hospital, getting out of the hospital, went through middle school, high school, college, working, have a son, a 21-year-old who just turned 21 this year, driving, and and so I'm a mom, and having my son every time he's not with me with the car. Moms, okay, I have to say nothing else. And so we have a full life, and so if there's a story, so like with Supercell, and I'm a big sci-fi person. Supercell, I like Supercell. It took hard to get through the first. I like the fake action. The real stuff is a little. I don't try not to consume it, but with Supercells, they took you kind of on a journey. And so with somebody with sickle cell, we go on a journey. And so how can we tell or show that journey? I love to travel. I love to read. I love to craft. I'm a big YouTube consumer. So we do so many things. And we're not on sickle cell. And so when we're in the hospital and you see us in that certain situation. And so it took a long time from us to go from calling ourselves patients to the warriors, because I'm not in the hospital right now, so I'm not a patient. But it took us a few years to change that narrative to say that, and then we had to figure out, what do we want to call ourselves? So let's think of the whole person with sickle cell. Let's tell that whole story. Sickle cell is a part of us. It's not us.
I absolutely love that.
Great. I think that's what I want to see too, is not a depiction of a sickle cell patient, but a whole person in living color with sickle cell.
That might be a new show. Living color with sickle cell.
Well, speaking of new shows, I want to hear from Gabriel about, as you're making this film about sickle cell and specifically in the Canadian healthcare system, how do you think about depicting sickle cell?
I think the most important thing, in approaching, the documentary I'm working on is humanizing the experience of sickle cell, right? Like humanizing us individuals as people, right? Because one of the big things, when I'm in the hospital and they're doing me dirty and they're not listening to me, they're saying I'm this and that or whatever. Like for me, I'm in the worst condition I am right now. I do not want to be here. I'm here because I really need the help, and you're dismissing me. And I'm always wondering, just on a human level, how somebody is able to dismiss somebody when they're at their lowest, right?
Yeah.
And it's maybe they don't have some sort of connection to sickle cell, or just Black people in general, or something like that, right? And I think that if we're able to humanize our experience to show that we're more than just the illness, right? And the symptoms of the illness, or what are the misconceptions, or whatever, right? Then people can understand. So it's my goal really is, if people can get to know me as a person, or my mom as a person, or my sisters or my friends as a person, and that might relate to, they might see themselves in us or their friends and family.
Yeah.
So when sickle cell comes up in their lives at some point again, they might give it a second consideration or a longer look. So that's the biggest thing, is really humanizing the illness. And then also, just really understanding what the stigmas are with sickle cell, because there's a ton of layered stigma, and it's different, depending on where you're at. If you're African, there's a whole bunch of stigmas there. If you're Black with sickle cell, there's a whole bunch of stigmas. Even if you're white with sickle cell, or Latino, from South America, or the Middle East with sickle cell, there's a bunch of stigma there. So trying to understand and unpack those stigmas, and kind of connect those stories into one place. But one challenge I've had to learn is that, in creating this, is I can't tell the whole story. Yeah. I only have so much time. I can only do what I can, and just pick the moments I can and try and tell those bits the best. But yeah,
That's a great perspective, and I'm so looking forward to this documentary. I can't.
Me too.
I can't wait for you to premiere it, man. That's awesome. Nick, all of us have been consumers of things that E2AC has produced, and I think E2AC as a as a organization that creates content about diseases, does its due diligence when it does decide that there's a disease we want to highlight. I'm curious, knowing the responsibility that comes with telling a story right, getting it right, what is the thought process for people who create content to ensure that they're getting things right? What is your process specifically with E2AC?
Yeah, well, we, as you could probably guess, fall more on the continuum side of giving something. We care, right? We want to get a story right. We don't want to just put it out there. And we're not in the business of creating commercial content that necessarily doesn't reflect the actual truth of what a warrior is going through. And so whatever the form of content it is, whatever the subject matter it is, we obviously are really, really disciplined about making sure we get that story right. And the easy answer to that is it just takes a little bit of effort. It takes, hey, let's interview some people before we do the interview to make sure the questions are not tone deaf, so that somebody doesn't shut down in the middle of an interview. I just co-directed a project on pediatric cancer, and before we sat down with any parent, we would do hours of research on, okay, what are the symptoms of this particular diagnosis? What are the medications that the child went on? What was going on at the hospital at the time? Some of them were treated at a hospital that has recently closed down. So knowing that that's going to be in the background of what we're talking about. And we spent more time on research than we did on actual production, because when you're dealing with really sensitive topics, it's your responsibility on the other side of the camera to make sure that you are taking it as seriously as you expect an audience to. And when you have a camera and you're pointing it at someone, what you're also really doing is handing them a microphone, So you're not just pointing a camera, you're giving them a mic. And if you want that microphone to magnify the story and make it as powerful as possible, it's your job to make sure you know what you're talking about. You're not just walking in, completely unprepared. And so I would like to think we're the best case scenario. And someone like Gabriel is the best case scenario because we don't take this stuff lightly. And it is also frustrating when you could see it as a producer or writer, when you see something and you're like, that person they didn't even care to look it up,
Yeah.
And that could be something as simple as a TikTok and something as developed as a nationally televised skit on television. So that's what we try to do. And it's something we spend a lot of time on.
Well, you guys do it very well, and we're happy you're in this space. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, FC.
Dr. C and I have asked a lot of questions here, and we were just talking about how we wonder if the audience might have some questions. What do you think, Dr. C?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, do you guys have some questions out there?
Let's hear 'em.
You guys want to ask the panelists anything? Okay, there we go. Let's go ahead and make your way to the mic. Let us know who you are, and let's continue the conversation.
So, I'm a researcher. I teach nursing students, and I have an artsy background that I had to squash for science. So this was really nice to be here. I'm wondering, you guys were mentioning it's a good idea for us to tell the story. And as I'm learning more about the industry, I'm learning that there are different types of people who produce content. And Nick, you were mentioning the writer or the producer, and then you have a director, and then you have an executive producer, and you have this and you have that. When we go out to advocate to make sure that the story is right, as scientists, as a nurse, who do we talk to? Which one of those people are the people we should be talking to? And what are their roles exactly? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, okay, well, if we want to do something, what do we do? There are actual programs that connect advocates to like writers' rooms, which is a really cool development. It's not something that's common, but it's something that actually is out there. So if it's scripted content, like a TV show, like we're probably used to, writers' rooms are a good place to do that. That's why foundations have started to pop that up to add, more inclusive voices into a room. And then on the documentary side, it's way easier because there's a lot less people to have to go through. Generally, documentaries, even the really big ones that you can see on Apple TV and Netflix, it's people who are pretty normal, and you could usually get to them pretty easily. So a good way to do that is to connect to people like us who it's not a very large world of that field. Like we probably know someone who knows someone. And if you write to Netflix, they're not going to get you that person. But if you just look up in the credits who produced it, they're not going to be hard to find. You can find them on LinkedIn. I've had a ton of projects start with me just DMing people being like, hey, I saw your project. It looks pretty cool. You want to chat? And then I tell them we have a foundation that helps connect them to funding and distribution. And suddenly I become very popular. So that is a really good place to start. And it's as simple as saying, hey, I work with this population. I saw you spent time on it. And again, if it's on the doc side, the unscripted side, that's somebody who spent years on that project. If it's a feature length or even near a doc, that's not something they cobbled together in a couple days. It probably took them years. So it's part of their life. It's ingrained in them. Anybody who's done something that's that powerful and is that subjective, it's something they lived with. Like my wife jokes that, the films I really get into, and we have an amazing one on Black maternal health that we're going to connect to SC Red and hopefully show it at one coming up. That is another roommate. That was like another roommate in my house for a while because she'd be like, "Are you looking at another version? This is a 3-hour version of this film?" And I was like, "We got to get it down to 90 minutes." So I watched so many cuts of that early on, and very little of it's even left because it's 5 years later. And I know the producers in that, their lives have changed. And so long story short, don't be intimidated to just reach out one-on-one. And if you don't get somebody right away, just keep trying or look for people who might be able to connect you to that person.
I can, could I actually speak to one of the things I love about Supercell is that, Supercell, the core of what the show is about and what sparks the superpowers is sickle cell. But in all realness,
spoiler alert, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But in all realness, that show has no business having sickle cell mentioned. It doesn't need sickle cell to tell that story at all. So the fact that they use sickle cell as a vehicle to try and tell the story, I think is big because the show isn't about sickle cell. It's about superheroes and regular people getting, superpowers and stuff like that. So sickle cell being in the backdrop of that, I think is really, really powerful and great. And we don't see a lot of that often.
One thing that I think about a lot with diagnosis, and this will be quick because we have a lot of people who got questions, which is awesome, is I don't think we think of having a healthcare diagnosis as a positive very often for lots of very good reasons. It affects your life in a lot of ways that is disruptive, right? But there is a flip side to that in the mask of drama and comedy. The flip side is you go through a lot of stuff and you become very resilient. And this is certainly true for sickle cell, but it's true for a lot of disease states. You become very resilient if you have had a sibling who has a diagnosis. You become a caregiver immediately. You learn to be really unselfish. You learn how to become an adult, and you learn what insurance is. You learn a lot of stuff that if you do not have that diagnosis, you would never have to deal with. And there is strength in having to deal with that early on. And I think that is, you learn how to empathize, right? Definitely. And that's a superpower. That might be the most significant superpower that we have as humans is the ability to empathize.
Yep.
And everyone here has that.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Let's go to our next question. Wow, that's quite a line.
And my question has to do with, you mentioned that foundations are starting to make it known that they are a resource for expertise on sickle cell, if I understood you correctly. Because part of my question has to do with how can we make sure that they get connected, that the film industry, the media industry gets connected to expertise? Can we be proactive in that? Maybe even a listing of who's producing these types of films, because I want to know who Transformers reached out to. How did they get it right? And I mean, you mentioned how Saturday Night Live probably got it wrong, but we don't know, right? So if were proactive, are there foundations? I know yours. Are there what are these foundations? And I would think the SCDAA, MERAC, our Medical and Research Advisory Committee, would be a resource. Maybe we can proactively let these folks know that we're here and can give you credible information? Just your thoughts, feedback on that.
I don't think there is a list, but I feel like we should make one.
Yeah, like generally how those like
Let's just do that.
platforms work is they're connected to not just sickle cell, like a bunch of like illnesses. So like what usually happens is when, you know, a project is being struck up or something like that, they'll go to like an organization that can connect people like filmmakers to people in specific, you know, areas and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know them off the top of my head, like their names, but there's a few of them out there. But yeah, that's something that we can proactively do and say, hey, we are available and we're out here, you know, if anything comes up or something comes down the pipes, that we're available to, you know, jump in when needed.
Yeah, just to piggyback, I agree, and we should be on that list for those organizations to reach. They need to know who we are.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
The right people are in this room.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more.
Part of my question is, we know that sickle cell is a recessive disorder, which in itself will genetically cause silos because we may not have everyone in a family have the awareness of living with sickle cell. Can any one of you all speak to the importance of getting to the side where we are having more light shed on the good living with sickle cell as it pertains to when there's ignorance and people not knowing, right? You know, we're getting it right and a lot of us are still getting it wrong about what sickle cell is and isn't. Not abandoning yourself among the journey when others maybe are leaving. I know that's loaded.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. I would say like, I think, you know, from my perspective, like, you know, it's really on our community to do for ourselves, you know, and if we can attach ourselves to projects or create projects or, you know, and help support each other, like fund projects to get things off the ground where we can tell our stories, because a lot of the times, like, you know, if something is mentioned in the pit or something like that, their agenda is not to try and show all that we are as people, right? That's not their agenda. Like the pit is a doctor show about whatever, right? And they'll, you know, spend 2 minutes on it, right? So like that might not be the place for that. But, you know, like, you know, on the projects you're working on, projects I'm working on, you know, there's another documentary by comedian Jay Snow he's working on. There's so many other projects, like, and if we can come together to support those projects and to get them out there, because we will tell our stories and show the other side of it. And once we create those projects, the big thing is how do we get as many eyes as possible on this. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but
yeah,
you know, for me, it's like, you know, coming into this, it's like, all right, like, you know, I don't want to wait around for someone to come and share this part and show the light that we have, the resilience that we have. Like, we should do it to ourselves and tell people, you know, put it in their face, like, hey, like, I know you heard of this, but like, we're very resilient. We're happy people. We're not all sad and like doom and gloom and stuff like that. Like, you know, I feel like it's our responsibility to, you know, put that out there.
So, and I feel like what's missing in the space is maybe the advertising, because everybody knows about diabetes, cancer, heart disease, because it's on commercials and the CVS's. So how can we get that for sickle cell? And I think that's what's missing in the space. It's great to have these little clips of movies or even a documentary, but it's not getting in front of everybody like those other diseases. You don't even have to know about diabetes to have heard about diabetes. So how can the sickle cell community get in those spaces? Who do we need to talk to get a sickle cell disease commercial on TV?
Right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I've been at sickle cell for 18 years, and I've yet to see a sickle cell commercial on TV, in paper. How do we do that? I think if we start there first, some things is out there, but if we start there first, let's go from there.
And to quickly add up to that, I know we're out of time, but like, you know, things like organize it, like diseases like cancer, AIDS, and, you know, they spend millions of dollars on marketing, like a year. like multi-million dollars, right? And it's like we might not have like big pockets, deep pockets like that, but there's things that we can do. There's a lot of talent.
This conversation has been absolutely amazing. I think this is our best cheat codes to date, Dr. C.
This was great. This whole SCDAA meeting was great, and such a great panel today. We could go on for a couple more hours. I think this is just season 1, episode 1 of this, but
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up.
No, but I got to tell you guys, this room, all of you warriors, caregivers, clinicians, the advocates that are in this room, you all have a story. Every single one of your stories is amazing. Just because there's not a camera rolling to capture the ups and the downs, doesn't matter. You guys got to keep telling your story. You got to keep showing up. We got to keep advocating to make sure that when the sickle cell story is told, it's authentically your story. We need it to be truthful. We don't need sickle cell to be understood. We need it to be felt. And with that, guys, thank you for coming to this Cheat Codes.